Welcome back to the Weekly Juice. As always, Ryan and Cory here. Today we're going to be discussing managing tenants and going through sort of like an in-depth educational episode. We don't have any guests today. We're just going to provide a lot of information on the managing tenants and the process essentially of being a landlord. Our upcoming episodes, we are just a little sneak peek for you guys. We're going to be talking about managing debt, personal finance, and taking a deeper look into real estate. And we have a few people coming on that have a lot of units and in different areas. So should be exciting. A lot of people have sent requests to discuss personal debt and student loans. So
that
we are
guest
on
is
top
going to
of it.
be awesome. I don't want to. Should we not even go there?
We won't go there, but she's a beast.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
very excited for an upcoming guest.
Yeah.
And tune in. It should be within one of the next few episodes.
Yep.
So let's dive in and we'll talk about tips for managing tenants.
Yeah. Also, I think we're going to have another like bigger property manager on in the future, but the way we wanted to structure this and the reason why we're doing this episode, Ryan kind of alluded to it, it's like we have in the beginning, the first 5 or 6 episodes, we had very informational so that when people listen to future episodes, they can kind of go back and say, oh, what are the terms that they're talking about? And we wanted like a basic overview. It's in depth, but a basic overview of managing tenants so that when we have bigger guests on who manage hundreds of units, so to speak, or something like that, they'll be able to say, oh, I can go back and listen to episode 14 to get like a baseline of what they're talking about.
Yeah, you can almost look at it as like when we're together, it's more of part of the educational series. That's how I view it.
That's fire.
Cool. So tips for managing tenants. Let's start out with bullet point number 1. First off, you want to treat managing properties as a business, not a hobby.
It's hard to do, but it's really what you need to do. It's funny because a lot of people talk about that, but if you treat it like a hobby, you're going to end up being like the nice guy. And then some tenants will try to, some purposely, some not, will take advantage of you. And then you won't be able to, kind of get those profits that you were looking for up front. So systematize everything. That's kind of what treating it like a business is. Like you have a specific way that you're going to do this. You may raise rent based on a specific percentage. But if you have that going in up front as a business, systematically approach it that way, then you can always point back to the lease when the tenant, if there's anything that goes awry with the tenants. So.
Right. So I'd say a few things that people need to stick to. Obviously, super plain and basic, but you need to know the national and the local laws. It varies state to state.
Yep.
So you could have something in Pennsylvania that's completely different in California.
Totally different. And some of them are like, not only that, but some of them are like, there's landlord friendly states and then there's tenant friendly states. So you have to like know what you can and cannot get away with almost in each state.
Yeah, essentially, or like what legality or legal systems would pursue if you essentially.
We're talking about it with Chris. Like,
yeah.
An eviction in Michigan is like $200. In New Jersey and PA, it's like it can be up to a couple thousand, So
right.
Those things have to potentially be factored into your numbers when you have your tenants up front to make sure that they're the right tenants. Because if you go through an eviction, it could kill your profit for the whole year, So
Right. So that brings us to the next point. Offer a great property for rent. Essentially, the higher quality and more attractive property you offer and put out in the market, it will attract a higher quality tenant. Mm-hmm. You want to be mindful. Once again, I kind of talked about the laws and like be mindful of fair housing laws, but there's things you can't discriminate against when screening and trying to find tenants for your place. Race, color, religion, familial status, national origin, if they're handicapped. So there's things that you can't specifically pick a tenant or not pick a tenant on based on. So just be aware, and it's stricter in certain states. So
when you say offer a great property for rent, that it's also understanding part of like what your market can bear, right? In some of these really nice areas, having granite countertops and having hardwood floors may be able to increase the rent. You might get a higher quality, so to speak, tenant. But in C markets, maybe C plus markets, that's not going to increase your profit margin because laminate counters and vinyl floors will do the same amount of, it'll give you the same amount of rent as putting in those granite countertops. So you don't want to spend so much money up front to try to fix up to make this immaculate property if it's in a C plus market, and it'll get the same type of renter that a nice property, but not as like decked out.
That's a great point.
Know what I mean?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
So when you're trying to attract tenants, right, as many as possible, it's essentially going to be a sales funnel, right? You wanna allow yourself to be picky and pick the tenant that's the right fit for you and your property and your business. Yeah. So essentially, you want to get as many eyes on it as possible and have an advertising system. A lot of people will use Craigslist, Zillow, Facebook, Postlit. There's a ton of different avenues and systems essentially you can use or websites. So make sure to do your research and get your property out in front of as many people as possible.
Yeah, I used Facebook Marketplace is massive. Like people are always looking for properties to rent on there. And one of the things that I'll say to test out your market to say whether or not you can like what the price is that you can bear is we talked about Rentometer, right? You can type in your property, how many bedrooms, specific area, and then it locates within a specific mile radius, like other properties in the area and what they would rent for. So you can kind of get a gauge. Also, another thing to do there, what I did for my property in New Jersey is I put I don't want to deceive people, but I put a fake ad on Craigslist at a specific market rent and said that this is before I closed.
This was to gauge rents.
Yeah, this is before I closed on the property. So I just wanted to see what it was like. And based on the amount of inquiries you get, you'll know like, oh, I got 200 inquiries. Like,
give a price. Just
like, so let's say I put a two bed, one bath on Craigslist for $1,500. If you get 1 to 2 inquiries, you're like, okay, maybe that's a little high. Like, I didn't get that many. If you get 250 inquiries in a couple days, then you're like, oh, maybe that's too low. And then you can kind of gauge. If you're getting 15 to 20 inquiries on a price, you could probably find one tenant out of those 15 to 20. If you get 1,000, like, oh God, I could probably increase this because I have such a big tenant pool to pull from.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Chris actually taught me that.
It's a nice little, I don't know, life hack.
He's a savage.
Yeah. That's great. So let's move on to screening tenants because you kind of segued right in there perfectly. So when screening tenants, you want to set high standards, right? We talk about there's a ton of different factors that fall into this bucket, but most people look for a verified income of roughly 3 times the monthly rent, correct?
Yep. So for example, if your rent is $1,500 a month, you want the tenant to who moves in your property to be making $4,500 a month.
You got it.
Yeah.
So it's because they need to cover their lifestyle as well, right? You don't want if they're making $1,500 a month, there's no way they're going to be able to just afford rent.
No, you just throw that out.
Yeah. So some people ask, okay, what if they're self-employed, right? And they can't provide because you need to provide legal documents to like a tax return essentially to prove that they're employed, but also that they're making this $4,500.
I think interviewing the tenant is even more important. It's almost like the same thing with getting a job. Like you can look at a resume and it can all look pretty and everything, but if you interview them, get face to face, this communication, talk to them, get a feel for how they operate, how they posture themselves. A lot of those things can nullify some of the other income things. Now, you don't want to. I think 1/3 the rent to income is pretty standard. You don't want to go below it, no matter what. But if you have somebody who's on the cusp and they feel really presentable and that they can, and they're just a nice person, you might give somebody a shot in that circumstance.
You have to find the happy blend because we talk like you have to stick to it as a business, right?
Yeah.
And that's where if you let emotions get into it, especially in the upfront, then you're gonna.
If you do it up front, guess what's going to happen when they're late on rent and you don't want to charge a late fee? Then the tenant already knows, well, this guy or girl or whoever's managing it, you're a little bit of a softie and I could probably get away with this. And you can't run it like that. So,
so for just going back to self-employed, they still have to provide a 1099 or some sort of tax return to you. I would hold them to that standard. Say they're like an artist or specifically whatever it is, or maybe they take cut video and they basically are a freelancer. You want them to be able to provide some sort of tax return so you can gauge the amount that they make.
Mm-hmm. Even just like a pay stub. I don't know if you need, I guess I've never taken tax returns, but like a pay stub or just verified income, call their employer. And that's like some of the things on the rental application that people fill out. You can use Cozy. I use Cozy. You can fill out your application right online. You can decide whether or not to charge tenants or not charge tenants. And then I don't because it's like why have somebody pay $35 up front just to fill out an application? So I never charge. That way you get more people to the funnel, you get more people to apply, and then you can pick from.
On the flip, say you charge $20 per application and you have 100 applications, nice little chunk of change.
Yeah, it depends on the market. Like if you know it's a really hot market, it's going to fill in like 2 days, then you could probably get away with charging. It's all about gauging, But
background on people. So essentially, rules of thumb here: no prior evictions, no prior felonies. They need to have a good credit history with no bankruptcies. So it's recommended a 600 plus credit score. And
that not always. So like I agree with that. I think it's a good rule of thumb and for people to just take as like a standard. But there are really great people out there who have bad credit, who are in a bad situation, trying to turn things around. I think it's good. It could be a good thing to give people opportunity. So it really depends. But I agree, 600 is a good barometer.
You want to check most of these off. So say, at least no prior evictions or felonies, and then you know what I mean. You don't want to.
Yeah, no.
Someone that's murdered someone in your house.
No, dude.
Come on.
Yeah. No, I didn't. Nothing about the felonies.
Right.
You don't want that. Yeah.
So, no, I agree. I thought you'd laugh a little bit more on that one. So background and credit checking. Obviously, you're going to want to run a background check and credit check these people. There's a few websites to use: rentprep.com, mysmartmove.com. Just a few examples if you want to write them down. Mm-hmm. And I think another important thing is like train your people. Train and manage your tenants effectively.
Yep.
Essentially, I heard the analogy that you almost want to treat it as a toddler in the beginning and like teach them certain rules, and the established rules, make them known in your lease and go over at signing, but then enforce the consequences when they're broken. It's just like when you're getting raised as a kid.
And it's really easy to do when you don't have or easy to say when you aren't managing tenants, because it's like, oh, I'm definitely going to do this. And I've ran into situations where I was like, I have to pull myself back in and remind myself that I have to do it this way because I am a nice person and I have nice tenants. But anything that your tenant gets away with or anything that your tenant does, you can blame yourself later. Like if they're paying late rent and thinking it's okay, it's not their fault. They're getting away with it because you didn't set the expectation up front that, look, I'm going to charge a $75, $100 late fee after the 6th of the month. COVID has changed those things a little bit, and I will say that I've had to be more lenient in the last 3 or 4 months and just be compassionate and say, look, somebody lost their job, they weren't getting unemployment. I had to take half the rent in the beginning of the month and half the rent at the end of the month. I'm fully paid up now, but I didn't charge late fees. And again, this is an ever-evolving landscape. So you don't want to just like stick to a hard 100% rule of thumb in a situation where you have a worldwide pandemic.
Right.
So now what I've been doing is I'm saying, okay, August 1, I'm back to charging late fees, and my tenants are fully aware of that.
So coupled in here, I know we had the conversation a few weeks back, but being that and we're going to have to dive more into, kind of the facts scrolling down here, but going into raising rents, we talked about, switching back to the business mind right after COVID, because who knows if there's going to be a second wave here, and like everyone's kind of a little bit walking on eggshells. Mm-hmm. What is your approach? I know you purchased this property in Jersey. Essentially, it already had tenants in it, mm-hmm. and they signed a lease and the lease didn't say that rent would be increasing. So you had the kind of like the internal battle here of like, hey, am I going to increase rents at a certain time? Like, how should I do it? Did you finalize where your head's at?
Yeah, so I'm going to go 2% rental increase, and their leases are up respectively in September and October. So I'm going to give them 60 days, meaning today's actually July 1st when we're recording this. So I'm actually, when I get home, I'm sending the rental increase letter and then the new lease. But I also went to the property and talked to these tenants to let them know.
Love that.
Just to make sure. I was like, how do you like the property? One of the tenants was like, I love it. I want to stay. And I just want to gauge. And 2% is not a major increase. It's essentially taking into considering inflation and also that my insurance is going to go up a little bit. So I think most tenants will expect that type of increase. But mm-hmm. what you're saying is that put it in the lease. So it wasn't in the previous lease, but my next year lease says if you want to re-sign after the year is up, it's a 10% increase if you want to go month to month, or it's a 2% increase if you're signing another year lease. If you put it in the lease, yeah, they have it signed, they'll sign it. And, you just want to make sure that you tell tenants, read every page, because I have some stipulations in here that if you want to sign on for another year after your next year's up, there's going to be a 2% increase. And most tenants will look at that and be like, that's pretty standard. A lot of tenants are expecting the increase, and unless you have some strategy to keep your tenants because you love them and and you don't want them to leave, you could not raise rent. I'm not going to raise rent every year,
Right.
but on the average, I'm going to raise it by 2%. So if I don't raise it next year, I might raise it by 4% the following year to kind of make up for that.
That's interesting. Love that.
Yeah.
So now that we're on the topic, there's a few different buckets I want to hit here. So super easy ways to collect rent, right? It's 2020 now. I keep hearing people, they have checks, money orders sent to them. That's not really my style.
Yeah.
If I could, I'd like to use something similar to Venmo. Do you want to talk about how you collect or what you like the best?
Well, I mean, Zelle or Venmo, having it come to you electronically is the best way, but you can't always do it like that. Like my tenants, they prefer to send money orders and then mail it to me. And a money order is actually, people are kind of like not afraid of it, but they don't really understand potentially what a money order is. But a money order is actually safer than a check because the money gets transferred automatically.
It's almost like a banker's check almost?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So it's cashier's check. So the money's already out of their account. So you don't have to worry about it bouncing. It's just, sometimes the mail system might take an extra day or two.
Right.
If they send rent on the 1st, you might get it on the 4th or 5th. But I accept money orders from my tenants in New Jersey. I would love Venmo, Zelle, and just keep track of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing is you want to have Excel sheets or some form of tracking system to make sure that you know what rent's coming in for tax season. But
not to cut you off, but doesn't Cozy have a feature that like reminds them about rent to pay rent, or how?
It does, but it depends on your tenants. Like my tenants are not very tech savvy in New Jersey, so they're not going to pay rent. Like Cozy allows you to pay rent online. It's awesome. So it depends on your market. I'd love for them to do it there. They're not tech savvy. They're very old school, and so you kind of have to, especially because I inherited them. If they're good people and they're good tenants, you kind of have to. If I had like 20 properties, I would probably do a major shift in, or even 5 to 7 properties, a major shift in how I'm collecting rent.
Have it blanketed and
Yeah. So right now, again, it's a work in progress. I don't have that many to manage, but as I get bigger, you'll want it to be more set in stone and within the lease.
Perfect.
I'd say. Yeah.
So for this, collecting rent, and we talked about kind of training your tenants.
I'd say
right?
don't pick up cash in person.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, but like
it
it's
just
tough.
kind of seems tacky in a way.
Some markets you may have to, but you don't want to be walking around with thousands of dollars on you, and it's just cash is the same thing as a money order. Tenants can go into their bank or any bank and get a money, or even the post office and get a money order. Just do it that way. So it's paper, it's in the mail, and if something gets lost, you can have a stub or a receipt that's tracking it as opposed to cash. Some people, when you're getting started, you kind of have to bootstrap and you have to pick up cash. I'm not knocking it. It's just that if you want to scale, what are you going to do? Run around to 10 properties and pick up cash? It's just hard.
Yeah. So, okay, once again, be firm but fair when it comes to collecting rent. I mean, we talked about it, running as a business. These people are not, it's not like a family member, best friend where you're like, oh, like, hey, can I have a little break on this? This is a rule of thumb that I did some research on, and you can let me know how you personally do this, but I loved this idea. Treating it as a business, essentially, say rent's due on the 1st. On the 4th of the month at 11:59 p.m., if the rent is not paid, a late fee is charged, whatever that late fee is. Then on the 12th of the month, they have a 72-hour window to pay by the 15th, or immediately, 11:59 on the 15th, right as it's about to strike the 16th, you file for eviction. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but
doesn't sound crazy.
Some people, like, at the end of the day, you don't want to set the expectation where they can pay late, and that's not how you run your business.
I'll say this: you're 100% right, unless there's a worldwide pandemic, and that's part of the thing that is tough. Because the last thing that I wanted in the last couple months, because one of my tenants did follow this to the T, and my other one lost her job and was really struggling, and I don't want to put somebody out on the street during a pandemic and then have a vacant property for 2 months. So I will say absolutely stick to this if times are normal, and who's to say what normal actually is. But if somebody loses their job, they still have to pay rent. They have to file for unemployment. They have to figure these things out. But I think that right now, it's just a time to reflect and say, you got to be a good person in the mix there. But what you're saying is 100% right. Like, that's what you should do. You have rent's due in the 1st, 5-day grace period to the 5th. If it's not on the 5th, late fee, and then you're evicting by the 15th. It's very good to run your business like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I think we always hear the myth of, oh, I'm a great tenant, I always pay rent on time, and like to be honest, that just means you're an average tenant that does what they're supposed to do.
That's what you're supposed to do.
That's what you're supposed to do.
It's like you shouldn't get an applause for showing up and doing your job, right? So you don't need to get an applause for paying rent on time. Like that's you don't miss a mortgage payment, right? I mean, look, tough times hit everybody. I'm not here to say that like that'll never happen to you. You never know. But I make mortgage payments on time, and the bank doesn't throw me a party for it. So it's like you have to stick to that business. And that's one of the things that I told my tenants, just being compassionate, saying, look, I know you're going through a tough time. I have to make my mortgage payments right now, and the banks are not giving me any leeway. So I need you to figure out a way to make this rent. And they understood. They're like, I get it. You're in debt to a bank, and I have to make my payment.
And I'm in debt to you.
Yeah. In a way. Yeah, exactly.
So this is an interesting tactic, and I'm not sure if you personally use this, but some people offer a 12-month cycle, 1 month out of the 12 months, you can have a payment plan. So if you're in a struggle, not a pandemic, but think about like, I don't know, say you maybe lose your job or like I don't know.
That could be it.
You just mismanage, right? At 1 month of the year, you can have a payment plan where maybe they pay half of it that month and then half the next month, or like on a 3-week cycle where they pay every third week for a month.
That kind of happened to me during this. Like, for example, my June rent, I got half in June, and then, in May, I got half in May, and then in June, I got the rest of the May, and then all of June. That's nice. But that was because of COVID, the COVID situation. I've never heard of that. I'm sure it could work depending upon your tolerance, but if you give them 1 month, what's 2? So it's kind of hard. I don't know if that's something that you would have in the lease, or
it would be in the lease. But you're like you said, it almost like
starts the cycle of like,
oh, he is kind of lenient.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So all right, let's talk about leases in general right now. So we kind of kept mentioning them, but I think they're very, very important, and you want to be super upfront with people. And have everything detailed out in the lease when you go through it. And I'm not sure if you do this, but a lot of people, it's old school, but what I hear is a very strong tactic is to have people sign the lease in person so you can walk them through each and everything that you're holding them accountable for. And that way they get to know you too.
Yeah, you can do that. I honestly actually meet with people probably before I send the lease out, because I'd like to do things electronically. I'd like to have them like even DocuSign if I could, or send it electronically. But I would just tell tenants to read the lease and say, look, I have a 17-page lease, so I need you to read every page to make sure you're good. I remember a couple years ago when we were renting, like, we would get a lease and I'd be like, whatever, just sign it. And like, you don't know what you're signing.
Let's say if I don't sit down with the guy and he makes it, or girl, and they make it important, I'm like, yeah, sure, I'm in.
And some landlords will take advantage of you and want you to do that too. So you don't want to just sign a lease.
Right.
If you're a tenant, just like you wouldn't just sign you wouldn't sign on the closing table without being like, hey, title rep, can you explain this page to me? But I'm saying, I don't think you have to be there in person.
It's so interesting because now I'm thinking about it. I've been on the flip side of both. I took it way more serious when I purchased my property and I was at the signing table, right, in closing, because I'm like, wow, I'm like officially signing everything. They're walking me through each page. Mm-hmm. If I did that, granted you're spending a ton of money on a place, but if I did that to rent somewhere, I almost feel like I would have taken it more seriously and been like, whoa, there's a lot of
stuff in a lease that you might not want to be in there. And that's one of the things that I'll tell the tenants. If there's something that you're troubled by or something you don't like, let's talk about it. The lease is not set in stone until it's signed. So if they say, I don't know if I can do this. No, I'm not saying that you can be like, oh, don't do that. Don't do this.
Yeah.
But I'm saying if there's, for example, I'll give you an example. My tenant is a painter, right? And he painted the bottoms. He painted in my apartment. And most landlords would be like, that's a no-no. You can't do this. But like, it looks amazing. And I was like, so I showed up and he did it without me knowing, which is most of the time not a good thing. But I went down there and I was like, this guy's trying to keep my property like nice, and it looks incredible. And it was the same color as it was previously. So I said, I'm actually, some landlords would be like, what are you doing? But I was like, I'm okay with that, because he put a fresh coat of paint, and I was going to have to do that if they left anyway. And he is a painter. That's what he does for a living. So I think he just did it with the previous landlord, so he thought it was okay. And I'll have a conversation to say, hey, like, let me know next time if you're going to do it. I don't want him to just start doing random projects, but this person's like the type of person that if the window's broken in the house, he might just go upon himself to fix it. And I love having tenants like that, so I don't have to get called for every little light bulb, you know?
Right. I was going to dive into that way down, essentially like at the end of the episode, but I think that's perfect time to jump in on it because you don't want them to take the property as it's their own in a way and start changing
that should be in the list.
That should be in the list. So for aesthetics, if they want to change that, like that, okay, that can be on the tenant if they get approval from you. But functionality, that's on you. So like when something breaks, maintenance, and I think you want to dive into different
like so if they want to put specific blinds up, right? That's aesthetics. That's all, the tenant can do that. If they want to have, posters on the wall, or they want to have picture frames or light fixtures, like they're bringing that to furnish the property. They can essentially do whatever they want as long as it's not obstruction of like some fire code, right?
Right.
But so I think that. What was your specific question?
Oh, no, you said deferred maintenance.
Oh, yeah. So this is why communication is so key. And it's written in the lease, but you need to get to know your tenants to say, look, if something happens or something breaks, you want to know about it. Even if it's something little, you just want to understand what happened. Maybe the tenant says, oh, the drain is clogged. Like, I think I can fix it. Yep. If they have that skill set, and you might say, okay, go ahead. But you want to know about these things because deferred maintenance can be way more expensive than taking care of something up front or preventative maintenance. You really want to know about everything. That way you know how to assess it. I had water in my property through these old windows, and the tenant was responsible, and this was after when I'd like her to be texting me. It was at night, but I looked at it and I was like, this is something that I need to address. So I went in, I fixed I bought new windows. It's something that you want to know because if water gets in the property, you just want to make sure that you're taking care of your asset. There are things that can damage it if you don't take care of preventative maintenance up front, and you don't want to defer those things. So that's why communication is key. Always tell your tenants, look, if something happens, just let me know.
Love it. Yep, absolutely love it. So diving further down into the lease, there's things I think that are important to highlight and things you just don't want people to be able to do in your house or in your property. Smoking, for example. I mean, this is, for me, a non-negotiable. If people are smoking in your house, the walls are going to turn, white walls are going to turn yellow. You're going to have to paint them again. It's just,
it's
going to smell.
Can't smoke inside. You want to smoke outside?
Yeah.
It's fine. Right?
So no smoking. This is a very interesting one, and I want to talk about it because I know a lot of people are going to get emotional. But some people don't allow pets. And then some people allow pets, but no dangerous breeds. So no pit bull, no Rottweiler, no Doberman. Which is interesting because I'm like, if you're going that specific, my personal opinion is like, can someone sue you for that? Like,
no,
I don't know.
I don't think so. I mean, it depends on the state, but I wouldn't get into that. I would make it no pets or pets because I think you'll get into an issue of like, oh, it's a mix. Personally, I don't believe in like dangerous breeds, but I think you can also get a property that is big enough that you might allow yourself to have pets. You'll have to gauge whether or not you're going to allow yourself to have pets. And you can charge maybe $50 extra a month and then a $200 deposit or something like that for pets. I wouldn't get into the breeds thing. I mean, maybe in some states it's legal. I don't actually know the answer to that. I might want to get somebody on that does, but I feel like it's almost a discrimination in a way.
Right. When we talked about you can't do that for
dude, I know
for
pit bulls
tenants.
that are the friendliest dogs in the world. Like, I don't want to even go there with that.
Yeah, it's super interesting. But I do love the idea of a pet deposit. Like, up front, charge $200 per pet. That's not that big. Most people don't have
a big dog in a property, it will take more maintenance. The floors are going to get, like, you're going to have to do more cleaning.
It's almost like a security deposit for the pet. But then some people charge $25 per pet per month. So think about like say you have $1,000 rent and we said increasing it by 2%. That's 20 extra bucks. But say they have a pet too, it's another 25.
It's also discretionary. I mean, like some people may look at it, how important, they're not going to give up their pet. How important is it to them?
Member.
So you might, it's a family member. So you might say, look, it's an extra $50 a month. And they're like, done. To have my pet? Great. Like, you don't want to overcharge people. You don't want to put an extra $200 a month or anything like that. But it depends on the market. Depends what it can bear. Right. And you just want to make sure that there's enough space realistically for that pet to actually like we talked about getting a pet in my property and like we just don't have the space really. So it's like you just want your property to have enough space that it can bear having a 50-pound dog.
Right. And I kind of want to know what the dog, I just want to know what dog it is up front. And obviously that comes with the screening the tenant.
And you'll want to write in the lease, like, you're not responsible for the dog biting a neighbor. That is not on you.
Right.
Because then there's a lawsuit. So I think that's about gauging risk tolerance for you. Like, I don't know. I don't have a specific way that I would go about that yet.
Off the top of my head, I can't think of it, but what do you call a dog or a pet that someone needs to survive? Essentially, like I know, like a seeing eye dog. What are they called? The service dog. Service dog. Got it. So if they have a service dog and a doctor's note for it, legally you can't charge them. How about that?
Well, you can't.
You
no,
can't.
Absolutely.
You cannot charge them.
And you
for
can't
it.
discriminate against either not having people that need service dogs.
Right.
So
it's just
you can't even. I don't even think you can do an extra deposit. It's like part of their medical needs. So you can't, which is correct. It's the right way to do things. Right. People need it, you know.
So I don't know how you do it, but I just remember when we were renting, we were responsible for our first month, last month, and a security deposit up front.
Depends on the state.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think that at least what you should do at the minimum is security and last, because they can pay first when they move in.
Okay.
But the reason that you have last is, let's say for whatever reason they need to break their lease.
Or COVID happens and they need to cover a month.
Yeah, and you need to say, okay, I'm going to work with you. You can get out of this lease as soon as I fill it, but you have their last month. So I'd say security and last is pertinent, but like some of our friends are renters, right? And they're moving into nice apartment complexes in Philadelphia, and they'll take first, last security any day of the week because they got 50 people that want to move in there. So it's all about how many applications you get. If you get 50 applications, you know you're going to have a lot of people to pick from, and it's not taking advantage of anybody. It's just saying, like, having this money up front gives you capital to work with. Now, you can't spend the security deposit. It has to get put in at least in New Jersey, it has to get put in a separate savings account, and you have to notify the tenant of where it is. But I'm saying it gives you capital up front if anything were to go wrong.
All right.
Yeah.
I got it. And I'm thinking back way to the point where we talked about when screening tenants, and you talk about how much they make and what's going to be due. Like, think about first, last, and Social Security deposit. I'm thinking about like the $1,500 a month for rent, and then that person has to make $4,500 a month. I just think it's impossible in some states. Like, I think whatever. It's going to change depending on the value of your rent. Some people say their rent's $2,000 and they don't make $6,000 a month. That's tough. Like, so you can meet in the middle there. And I'm just thinking
put it in your lease. That's all I'd say. Whatever you decide on it, put it in your lease. But you have to get security deposit. You have to get security, and I would suggest getting last too. But put whatever you decide, put it in your lease. And it's kind of a flowing thing. You don't have to do. You can do it how you want to do it.
Right, it's your business. You got to set up the right way. And obviously we talked, you can blanket it and scale it once you have many units down the line. I think right now, when you inherit people too, you have to get...
Inheriting tenants is tough.
There's going to be a shift at some point.
You can't evict tenants just because you inherited them. So it's a tough play. You want to make sure that's why communication is so key, because when a landlord leaves, a lot of landlords are like, not great. They don't manage their assets well. That's why they sell them. So that when you come in as the landlord who cares about people, who wants people to have a nice place to live, you have to meet with those tenants as soon as you have the turnover to say, look, I'm the new owner or I'm the new property manager. This is how things are going to go. Also, I think a great way to do it, and something that I haven't done that I need to do, is that when you I think Rio or Ian in previous episodes mentioned this. When you inherit tenants or when you have new tenants, you always want to say we as the decision maker. Like, that way you can have something to fall back on, like a lease or a property management team. When you say, oh, hey, can we put a pool in? Well, we have to discuss it. We have to figure this out. That way it gives you an opportunity to step back, and they're saying, oh, these people have a team set up and they're involved, and they're not the only stakeholder. Even if you are the owner, treat yourself as the property manager and say, I have to go talk with the owner. I have to go talk. It's not deceptive. It's just to give yourself, you don't have to answer all these questions up front. You can take some time to think about it and answer it when you feel appropriate.
See, that's super interesting, because not that it contradicts some things that we said before, but okay, sign the lease in person. Like, are you upfront stating that you're the property manager, or you own the house, or do you not have to say it?
I don't know what the law says, but I will always say that even if I am the owner, I will use it as a business and say that whatever my business name is, C. Jacobson Enterprises, that we have to discuss it over, as I have to talk with my team.
Got it.
Because I'm not the only person who owns the property. Even if you are, the point is that you want to be able to fall back and say, I got to discuss this. I don't have an answer for you up front. I will get an answer to you. Similar to how you would run a business if you're talking to clients. Like,
100%.
You're up front the information that you know, but it's okay to be like, I don't know. Let me get back to you.
Right.
Same thing.
Cool. Yeah. Love it. So anything that you think we should touch on to close out leasing? Or the leases?
No, I mean, I think that the lease is like your contract. So what you want to do is always defer to the lease. And if a tenant has an issue with something that they already signed, you can always say, look, I'm just following the lease. I have to stick to the lease. And if it's in the lease, you always have something to point to say, this is how it's going to be because, look, you signed this lease and this is how it is. And I think that's really important. So just make sure that you have that contract the way that you'd like it to be written up.
So another story I'd like you to dive into quickly is talking about the request for a pool and how, hey, it wasn't in the lease, you were able to fall back on that.
Yeah, so this is tough because I inherited the tenants and the lease that was written up for them is the one that I have now. I wrote a lease addendum to add some things, but that lease isn't everything that I would have on a new lease. So they asked for a pool and I evaluated it over a couple days and they would pay for the pool, obviously, but think about a couple things. I have to fence in the pool, okay? My insurance will go up.
A lot.
And there's a liability if a neighbor climbs the fence. What if a kid drowns? There's just a lot of things that go into it. So I respectively told them, look, I'm sorry, I'm not going to allow a pool, even if it's an out-of-ground pool. It's
too much of a risk.
It's too much of a liability for me. And they understood. One of my tenants was angry about it, but I'm like, I'm sorry. It's a business.
Yep.
That's how it is.
Cool. Great share. So then we talked about turnover a little bit, right? So a couple main reasons for turnover, and you can add a few in here too when you see fit, but bad maintenance is huge. I think when people are not say they have an issue and you take 2 months to reply to them or you just don't fix the issue, they're gonna be like, you didn't take me serious. I'm gonna go somewhere that they will take me serious and they'll take care of my house. Like I live here. They want to feel that in a way it's their property too.
Yeah.
I would say raising rent is another one. We talked about.
You have to know what the market is.
Right.
You can't raise the rent ridiculously. And they can even sue if you're like, rent's $500 and the next month it's $900. I mean, if it's like unreasonable, they can say this is ridiculous. Or they can leave, but it has to be around what the market can bear.
And when we say what market can bear too, obviously there's a little leeway, but traditionally it goes up with inflation, about 3%.
Yeah.
So, and people typically get a raise each year, 3%, depending on your industry for inflation. So it's not crazy to be like, okay, I'm raising my lease.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that we should talk about is that if you're a good landlord and you respond on time to maintenance requests and you can give yourself 48 hours to do this, one of the things that I've done is I've set up a Google Voice so that is my business number and I have a business email address.
Love that.
Gmail, so that when they call me, it goes to a Google Voice number, which is awesome. And all of my tenant requests are set up there in the Google Voice. So, and that is a way to say, look, if you're a good landlord and you respond on time, you already are separating yourself from majority of landlords because most of them don't do that, So that's why I don't have my tenants texting me on my number because I don't want to lose some of the maintenance requests. I don't want to lose some of the things they ask me about the lease. It's all in one number on my Google Voice. Google Voice is amazing. It's free.
So that is huge, and I think a lot of people will be like, okay, I get the points here, the basics of landlording 101, but how do you, but this is what I'm always curious about too when we have guests and when I hear stories about people in real estate, it's like, how do you manage your business, right? We call it a business. Like you talked about opening Google Voice, talked about potentially using Cozy, Excel. Like, how do you structure your day or your schedule around that? Like, when do you have time to get in touch with them? And then also, what systems are you using to keep everything organized?
Well, I have an income expense tracker that's just Excel for each of the properties. Income expense tracker, it has income coming in, it has all of the expenses, that's repairs, maintenance, taxes, insurance, you can account for vacancy. It has like legal advertising and it's by the month, January, February, March. So I just put in, every time I get a check in, I'm putting it in the income. Every time my mortgage is paid, I'm separating it out. So I have an income expense tracker that every single month that I'm saying, this is what's coming in, this is what's going out. So you understand, you may be able to predict your cash flow up front, but you want to know what it is at the end of the year. So that's something that you can do in Excel, and you can find templates online for free. That's easy. I use Cozy, but because my tenants aren't really savvy in the tech industry, I don't collect payments online. I think that's a really good way that you should collect payments online if you can, and Cozy can track it all for you. And then there's other property management softwares like Buildium, which is for, I think, larger portfolios. They charge a fee, I believe, for landlords. So that definitely track it in whatever way you want to do it. Rio was talking to us last week, or I think it'll be a couple weeks ago's episode. He has Excel. He uses Excel, and he manages 30 rentals. Like, so he can do it that way. Ian, who we've talked to a couple times a couple weeks ago, does it through Cozy. So whatever you're comfortable with, but you have to track it. This is very important.
And I would try out each software and like in each whatever.
And most of them are free for landlords.
Cool.
Most of them. Yeah.
Whatever works for you. We talk about, I think, just even like back.
Oh, and the Google
files.
Voice. Yeah. So like the Google Voice is separate email for. I have it for projects that are going on in the property. They'll email me at this. For tenants, for maintenance requests. I know I have this specific email and Google Voice that is attached to that where I can pick up phone calls and do text, and they're all separate from my actual number. And I think that's massive for being able to separate it out and decipher if this person's calling me for this, it's not getting mixed up.
So I know landlording is not essentially your main gig right now. How do you balance your 9 to 5, but also being a landlord? And when do you respond to people?
It's funny that you say that, because we were talking about office hours. Like, I have a set office hours, 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday is when my tenants can contact me about maintenance or something that's not an emergency.
Okay.
I won't lie to you. Like, I answered a text at 9 p.m. a couple weeks ago because there was a problem in the property, like a serious problem. So I'm not saying you never go against it, but you can have your weekends, and you can have, like, if somebody texts you on a Saturday, you can respond on Monday if it's something that's not really important, and as long as you get back within a decent time frame. But this is something that's in the lease. It's something that's up front that you talk to your tenants about. Mm-hmm. Look, my office hours, like a business, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. That's when you can expect responses from me. If you don't hear with me within 48 hours, I'll get back to you. That's, yeah.
I think in my head, I always, I'm thinking that these requests are going to happen a lot, but at the end of the day, depending how many properties you have, it might not be as frequent as people think. Can you give a gauge in a 1 month time frame how many requests you may or may not get?
Well, I think it depends totally on your property. If you buy a property that has a lot of deferred maintenance and you don't do those things up front, you don't do preventative maintenance, you're going to get more calls. If you have a really old property, you're potentially going to get more calls. If you buy the property, fix it up, make sure all the major systems are in place and working, you're going to get less calls. I would say that on an average month, I probably get 0 to 1 inquiries about something. But a lot of times it's more so right now because I've been talking to my tenants a lot about when their rent's coming in because of COVID. So On an average month, I mean, I'm spending 1 or 2 hours a month, literally, on maintenance requests. And then I'm making a phone call to a plumber if they need to. I haven't had, knock on wood, I haven't had many major problems. I had the windows, but it's not a lot of time.
Love that.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for the context.
Yeah.
So we talked about managing relationships with tenants and how communication is key in pretty much everything, right? Like you want to treat it as a business, but also you want to treat people as people and have a relationship with them should you desire, right? So what I think is important too is like to keep a mini like organizational file on each of your renters. And it's nothing crazy, but it's something to keep. Hey, what do they do for work? When are their birthdays, their kids' names, etc. Just so if you ever want to have a creative touch point with them.
Yeah. Or send them flowers on Mother's Day, right?
Total beast. Did you
I
do
missed
that?
it.
Oh my God, we talked about it.
I know, it was during COVID and it was, I literally forgot.
Yeah,
but Father's Day, Mother's Day, yeah. I know. Seriously, those are the things that if you have good tenants, you want to send them something on Father's Day, and you don't want it to become an expectation of the tenants, but it's a nice gesture.
It's going to set you apart from someone else. And put it this way, if I lived in a place and I got a birthday card from my landlord, I'd be like, dude, are you kidding me? This guy's awesome. The man.
I know.
I mean, like, it's kind of like,
it's awesome.
You just wouldn't expect it. It'd make your day, you smile, and you'd be, when it comes to renew your lease, you might think twice and be like, you know what? Actually, I'll just stick here. It's easy. And this guy's awesome.
Yeah. And that's another thing that I was at my property the other day. I was just talking to my tenants and just being friendly. And I was asking, how are you doing through all this? How is the property treating you?
Right.
Do you have any complaints? And he was like, I love it here. Like, this is awesome. And for me to hear that, I'm like, he wants to stay. And we have a good relationship. The relationship between the tenant and landlord does not have to be this butting heads thing.
Right.
It can be a mutual understanding. Like, this is a business, and I want you to enjoy the place that you live in. I want you to have a good living experience here. I think
you don't want to be so tooth and nail and like tight on everything. They just be like, all right, like I'll just go find somewhere else. This is too hard.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's awesome. We talked about the idea of potentially signing leases in person, and once again, that's face-to-face interaction. I kind of like that idea.
Yeah.
If you can. Mm-hmm. So I guess a couple little other nuggets here, rules of thumb is like always call them before entering the property, even though it's your property. I don't think surprise visits are a good idea unless it's absolutely necessary, because it's like, okay, you're kind of invading my privacy.
And there's in the lease, you shouldn't be able to enter. Like, it should give the tenants 24 hours. I think that's a good rule of thumb, and there might be laws that actually state that. I'm not sure.
Cool.
So.
We also talked about sending notices in writing. You and I talked about this, off the cuff on the side, but basically, it's a nice call, or it's a nice personal touch to have a call with each thing you put in the mail. So for example, like if rent's increasing, right, you have to
send a letter in New Jersey. You have to send a letter 60 days in advance.
Right. But
and then send them a text or shoot them a call and say, hey, this is coming.
Okay.
Yeah.
You and I
or
went back
not
and
a letter.
forth.
I can email a letter, but yeah.
In writing.
Yeah,
correct.
In writing.
But I think it's a nice touch. Hey, you went over and you talked to them.
Yeah.
It's just it's super cool. Some people don't do that.
Well, it's harder to do when you have out of state or a bunch of rentals, but that's why you need that team around you, and you have set up a Google Voice, or you have a property manager that handles the leasing. So I manage my own tenants, and that's obviously what we're talking about here. But when you have a property manager, all this stuff is something good to go over with your property manager. This is the things that I expect, or you're going to get 10% of the rent every month. Like,
right.
You want to make sure you have expectations of your property manager to manage the tenants the way that you would, and then free up your time more, which is great.
Yeah, that's
yeah. I mean, it costs money, but once you get to a certain scale, it's definitely the way to go.
Right. So overall, with communication, people essentially want to know they're being taken care of and empathized with. They're human beings, right? Like, it's treat people how you'd want to be treated.
Yeah.
I would say this is just in life in general. Is like tough conversations usually aren't as tough as you think they're going to be. So don't wait. Act. Just figure it out as soon as you possibly can, because the longer you put it off, they may not say anything to you. So it could be like a maintenance request. They could, I don't know, for example, just say like a light fixture needs to be replaced, or something happens and you kind of just blow it off. They might not say anything to you. They let it go by, but bet your ass they remember that when it comes time to renew.
Yeah, exactly. And I went to my property the other day to fix the windows, and there were some drywall issues, and like clearly it was something that the tenant did. So, I mean, I will be taking some money from their security deposit, but I saw it and I said, okay, I need to assess the situation. I'll patch some drywall, re-hang like a hanger, or a, what are those called in the bathroom? Like
a shower bar kind of
Yeah,
thing?
It wasn't a shower, it was the towel bar.
Bar.
Yeah. So like that something came out of the wall, and it's just something that I went over there and said, okay, I need to assess this. But you're so right about the conversations. Like, this is not as scary as you think. Everyone needs to either be paying a mortgage or paying rent. So it's like one of the tasks that are essential. So you need to make sure that you're doing it the right
100%.
way.
I work in client relations in my 9 to 5, and it's just a rule of thumb, and it's bit me in the ass so many times if I just don't take care of something right away. And I'm like, oh, maybe they forgot about it because I forgot about it. And then it comes back down the line, and like when it's their turn to renew or have another conversation with me, they're kind of standoffish. I'm like, what happened? Like, what did I miss on? And then when it kind of like finally shows the light again, you're like, damn, like I missed that. And it sucks. So
you mentioned taking money out of someone's security deposit for like the drywall.
Yeah.
When do you charge at the time if they damage something?
So agreed. That's a good point, Jake. So like what you want to do is, if you have something that is like, my tenant broke a window, like just the glass pane. So I ended up going in and saying, I'm just going to replace the whole window, but the tenant is responsible for the glass. So I said, I need you to we're calling it additional rent. I need you to send me an additional $100 for the glass. And she said, I don't have the money right now. I can't do this right now. I said, okay. Then I resorted to taking it out of the security deposit. You don't want to
Did she break the window?
She broke the window. Yeah. You don't want to go automatically to taking it out of your security deposit during the lease, because a lot of times the security deposit is for when it's turned over, then you can assess the property. So what you would do on maintenance like that, if it's something that's on the tenant and they did something they broke something, you really want to collect that money as additional rent when it happens. But worst case scenario, she says, look, I can't afford, or I can't do this right now. You want to recoup your money. So I said, look, I'm taking it out of your security deposit just as a heads up. I put that in writing in a text message. So I don't know if that really.
So yeah, I think that was great. I'll also say,
but you don't want to get in a habit of doing that, because like if your security deposit is $800 and they have a bunch of things that happen at the end, you're left with no money. So normally what you would do is you'd say, okay, I'm taking it out of your security deposit. I need that $120 or $100 back to put back in your security deposit. So at the end you have the same amount.
Could you spread that out? Say they don't have the $100, but you're like, can you spread it out over?
I was gonna do that, but because of COVID, I was like, this is just a lot. I was just like,
how'd she break the damn window?
She said it was moving in, but I don't really know because it was in the bathroom. So I think her daughter, she's got a 3-year-old daughter who's kind of like just all over the place. I think she might have just like threw something at it. Whatever.
Easy.
I mean,
whatever. Happens.
She's cute.
That's cool. All right, so let's talk about renewals. At the end of each lease, depending on the term here, you're always going to have a renewal cycle, right? And you want to get people back and to stay as long as possible, as long as they're good tenants. So I've heard a lot of different tactics and just little touch points that people might use. Let me know your thoughts on these. But like a really cool one I loved was like, hey, if you sign up for another 2 years, another year, you can pick a home improvement project and it'll be my gift to you in the house. Like, so say someone wants to put in like a brand new chandelier. They want to spoof up a room or something like that. Depending on the price, I think it's kind of a cool idea. Just like, what's your dream enhancement to the house? Give me like 5, and then, hey, you pick one.
Yeah, make it feel like their own. I agree. I've never done that, but I what you were saying, we said this earlier, like if they want to go month to month after the year's up, I don't like month to month leases. With some of the markets, you need it. So you'll say, look, there's a 10% increase in the rent if it's month to month, 3 or 2% if you sign on for another year. Chris has like 5-year leases on properties with people. I mean, that's security. The biggest issue that happens with properties and the way landlords lose money is extended vacancy. You don't want vacancy for 3 months. You're losing out on X amount of dollars in cash flow, and you shouldn't really have 3 months where it's vacant, but you want to keep your tenants if you can.
So basically you're saying 3 options here. Option 1 would be they can continue on a month-to-month lease with an incremental raise in rent, but like a pretty decent size chunk.
Month-to-month's risky for the landlord, so you want to make sure you're covered.
Okay. Option 2 would be renew for another year with a smaller rent hike.
Or you keep it the same. You could.
Okay.
But yeah, small rent hike or keep it the same, yeah.
And then maybe even a 2-year term and lock them in essentially with a smaller rent hike. Like it's always going to go up, but maybe it's a smaller percentage.
Yeah, maybe it's 10% for month to month, 3% hike for a 1 year, and a 1% hike for 2 years or something like that.
So this is interesting because a lot of people want to move out in the summer and move into a new place in the summer because it's hot. No one wants to move in the winter. So how do you personally feel about month-to-month leases? I'll share mine after this, but it's interesting to think about conservative risk versus I'll just go super risky, and I think month-to-month is super risky, whereas conservatives no, let's just lock them in.
Well, in the Philadelphia area, you don't want somebody moving out in December. Right. Holidays, this, that. Weather, it's cold. So on a month-to-month lease, if you have to do it, I would say that you need 30 days, at least 30 days notice. So if they're going to move out in January, you need to know by December 1st that they're going to be moving out. So that's what I would say. You need at least 30 days of the next month of when they are potentially moving out. But it's way easier to fill a property March through September in the Philadelphia area. Look, if you live in Arizona, I don't know that it matters that much. It might not. But if you live in the Northeast where we are, I don't want to move at all in the winter. It's tough. So I have actually a great situation now where my leases end in September and October. So not even going to give a month to, I give a month to month option, but
or maybe
I don't think my tenants are going to want to do that anyway.
Say yours is let's talk about this. Say it's ends in October or November. Would you, instead of going month to month, would you say, all right, how about a 3-month? And then you know what I mean?
I've never done it. I don't know. I think you probably could.
Right.
Yeah.
I just think the month to month thing is tough. It's way more risky.
Yeah,
right?
a lot of people do it though. It really depends on the market.
Cool. So You want to dive into move-in and move-out policies. I think you talked about like taking photos.
Yeah, that's really important. When I bought the property, when I inherited the tenants, I went through and I took photos of everything in the property. So that way you have something to point back to that's time-stamped. That's like, look, this drywall wasn't broken, so there's no discrepancy between what happened, right? When you moved in or when I inherited the property, this wall looked like this, or this fixture looked like this. So that's major key, because then you'll have discrepancies over and over, like about who did what. Remember in our property when we moved out of our when we moved out, like there was one day where I was locked out of the house, so I had to cut the screen and climb through a window. And like I didn't want to do that to the property. But then later, I mean, we were cool with it. He was like, look, I have to replace this screen. It's coming out of your security deposit. Fine, no problem. Like, done. And then...
How about the wax? We were talking about the wax. So I fell asleep with a candle.
You spilled wax all over the basement.
I fell asleep with a candle on like an idiot watching a movie.
Yeah.
And I must have whacked the candle.
Yeah.
When it must have went out, whatever. I think I closed it before bed or something like that, but I ended up hitting it in my sleep. It hit against the wall and wax got all over the carpet. Yeah. And I tried for 3 hours to get it out.
And he had to replace the carpet. So like you were like, dude, I get it. It's coming out of my security deposit. We didn't even question it. But he would have taken photos of the basement. This wax problem wasn't a problem. You waxed the place and then it's a problem. So it's on you, right? Like, 100%. So I don't know if he took photos or not, but we were just like, we're not going to fight this. Like, clearly I cut the screen to climb in a window, which was so dumb.
I think we were right, but you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, exactly.
I think for what it's worth, we were pretty easy tenants.
We were good tenants, yeah, and that's what you want. I mean, he knows that. And when we left, he was able to fill it pretty quickly and actually raise the rent. So good for
him,
Steve-O.
Yeah. So last thing I want to cover is like bulletproofing properties. I think it's pretty cool, to talk about. And so you already talked about understanding what your market can bear, right? Like you don't want to put like granite countertops and crown molding and make it look super beautiful if you don't need to.
If it's a C+ or a B- market, and it wouldn't matter if it was carpet, right? Mm-hmm. But what I will say is that having a rental property be all vinyl flooring, for example, vinyl or laminate flooring in today's day and age, almost anywhere, you're going to have a lot less maintenance. You're going to have a lot less cleaning. You don't have to clean like carpet. I would say that having vinyl flooring or laminate flooring, as opposed to even wood, you don't need to have wood. It'll just throughout the whole house, it'll make it an easier fix or an easier cleanup. So,
dark colors are huge.
Yeah.
And every time you come in this place, you said, because I have dark like gray floors, and you're like, dude, this place looks so clean. I'm like,
yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
But
what you're saying is that if you have dark floor, not dark walls, but you have dark floors, you're not going to have as much staining. You're not going to have as much...
it hides scratches and things like that too.
Exactly. So that's one of the things, dark colored hardwood or vinyl flooring.
So to go to duplexes, which I want to talk about too, because I think the recommendation is, right, install, we said, dark colored hardwood or vinyl allure flooring, something that is going to hide things. But if you have a duplex, which is like essentially 2 units, not side by side, I'm thinking stacked on top of each other.
That's how mine is, yeah.
So there's a recommendation to install carpets in the top floor so that it soundproofs.
I wouldn't do that way. I would just make sure it's insulated the right way.
Okay.
You can foam insulate. You can rip open a little bit of drywall and make sure it's insulated. I just think carpets is too much maintenance. I wouldn't recommend it. But like, for example, in my property, I have carpeting on the stairs, and then the rest of the floor is wood. I'd like to put it... That's interesting. I'd like to put it... That was just how the person who flipped it renovated it. Mm-hmm. I'd like to put... it was laminate. I like to put laminate there too, but... you can't do all the projects up front, especially when you're just getting started. You want to make sure that you're doing the major things to make the property rent ready, because you don't have a lot of cash flow when you're just starting out. And I was talking to Chris, we were at the property the other day. He's like, it would be really cool if you took this front porch that's enclosed and made it open. And I was like, I'd love to do that. He's like, wait 6 months, wait a year. It might add value to the property, but you got to have some cash flow coming in and like have some capital or equity within the home.
Yeah.
To be able to do.
I like that.
Yeah.
And then just kind of chill out front on the porch and
I have like an enclosed porch and there's carpet in there, and like it just gets hot and it's just not. It's not ideal. So I want to like put tile down, take out the windows, and just make it a front porch.
I like that.
Yeah.
Cool. So then I think the last thing, unless you can think of anything else for bulletproofing a property, but always change locks in between turnover. Just super important.
That's huge, yeah.
there could be friends, boyfriends, girlfriends that have you don't know how many keys that people have made,
And
right?
yeah, they can go to Home Depot and make a key. Also, one of the really cool things is doing like pin pad, like keypad locks and stuff. You have numbers. I mean, you can change it whenever you want, but I think that's like I thought about doing that as having like I forget the name of it. Google makes a product where you can get pin pad installed, and it's 6, 7, 8, 9, and then you can get into the property that way.
So there's something called Simply Safe. And
Simply Safe, yep.
Is this that's my kind of thought too. Is like, what about cameras on a property? You don't want to be invasive to your tenants, but security to like protect your property.
I don't, but I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
I think it's a good idea. It's just something I haven't gotten to yet, but
Cool.
I think it's a really good idea.
Very cool. So if you don't have anything else, I think we should.
I think we covered a lot, and there's probably more. We talked about having another property manager at a larger scale on to talk about this more systematized things as you scale, which we will in the future. We're going to have somebody on, but I think that gives people just a baseline to play with, where if you're buying your first, second, third, fourth property, this is some of the, hopefully we give enough tips to move forward.
Cool.
Yeah.
So
Last drop.
You
Got
time.
it?
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
So we gave a ton of information here, right? This is one of our informational, educational series episodes. I would, my last drop today is 2 book recommendations, and this will help. Buy these immediately after hearing this episode, and whether it's on Audible or on or just a tangible book, right? These will help you immensely, and some of the things we covered here, they'll go in way more depth. Both of them are presented by Bigger Pockets, which we love and kind of go by all the time. Brandon Turner wrote one of them, and he and his wife wrote the other. But the first one is the book on rental property investing. It's phenomenal. It just goes into the super basics. And then to follow up with that immediately is the book he wrote with his wife, Heather. It's called Managing Rental Properties. So the book on managing rental properties. So
they're like geniuses. I mean, they're like, Brandon's looked at as like the godfather of real estate right now. At least the godfather of like
our
marketing and like real estate, where he's talking online and stuff. But he's amazing.
He's amazing. He has tons of YouTube videos too. I just think he's a total stud, and I recommend these books, right? Like, I have both of them. It helps you gather this information, put it into more context. There's stories that are shared. So
I'll leave people with this. I think that everyone needs to just understand how they would like their business to run. There's not a set way that you have to do it, but treat it like a business. Understand the way that you want to do it personally. What are you comfortable with that frees up your time? Because that's the whole reason you're doing this. You can get stuck into real estate like any other 9 to 5 if you don't run it correctly. So if you have the office hours, you have the systems in place, that is the key. Because if you are just like running through it like a hobby, you're going to be just as busy as you were in the 9 to 5 that you hated, right?
100%.
Yeah.
So I'd say if you're still with us, still listening, to close out the episode, we want to thank you for your support. We've had amazing support and feedback from everyone so far. If you could, please like, share, subscribe. A like on Apple Podcasts, or a review on Apple Podcasts is massive. We thoroughly appreciate that. And then also feel free to follow us on Instagram at Weekly Juice Pod. We post not only clips of like upcoming episodes and highlights, but also infographics essentially that talk about
thought-provoking stuff.
Real estate investing, personal finance, running your life as a business, like just fun informational things that we'd love you to come and enjoy.
Yes, sir.
Free game. So thanks for joining us, checking out Ryan and Cory for the Weekly Juice.
Thanks, guys.